Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Stav and this is my husband Mac. You guys must have seen him if you've seen some of my videos before because he's been in quite a few of them. He's also the main instructor in our second online course, which is a live fire course called the Practical Handgun Academy. So if you've taken that course, he's the one that's doing all the teaching in that course. But we wanted to make a video specifically on recoil because we're in the middle of our Finding the Perfect Carry Gun series. We're about almost nine episodes in, and if you've been watching those videos, you might notice that my left hand comes off the gun when I'm shooting certain guns, and we've received some comments mentioning that and asking about it. So Mac had this idea to do a video on recoil, talking about recoil, what affects it, how your size affects it, and so he has a lot of really interesting information to share with you guys, and that's what he's going to be sharing today.
Well, hey guys, so like Stav said, this is a topic that I've been wanting to talk about ever since she did the CZ episode. In that episode, you could see her left hand coming off the gun significantly more than I think we've ever filmed before. And it sparked comments, and as I'm reading the comments and helping Stav answer comments, it's just one thing that I think is super important to understand as a shooter and especially as a firearms instructor. So that I know there's a lot of instructors out there that don't necessarily fully understand how recoil works completely and how to take that information and help their students. And if you're relatively new to shooting, or you're just a shooter and you want to become a better shooter, understanding recoil is super important. I would probably title this Understanding Recoil. It's probably not marketable enough and snappy enough, but if you can fully understand what's happening, what recoil does, how it affects you, you're going to probably be able to understand it, therefore shoot better, and also choose better firearms that are better suited for you. And if you're an instructor, you'll be able to instruct your people better. So I'm not going to get super technical in this. I'm going to use technical knowledge and like laws of physics and Newton's theories and all that stuff to just explain it in normal plain language, so that by the end of this video you understand what recoil is, how it's generated, how it affects you, and then that might help you not only shooting and make you be able to be a better shot, but also to help choose firearms and to help your students, if you're a firearms instructor, help them. Because recoil is so significantly different from person to person. And it's just like when I watch Stav shooting that CZ, and I think episode 3 or episode 2, I'm watching that. I'm normally behind the camera. I'm your primary filmer and producer, I guess. But it's so much different. Stav is less than half my size. I'm mid 230s, 235 pounds, whatever, you know, and I'm 6'5". Stav is 5'2" and like 107, 108 pounds. So the way that recoil works is different for her than it is for me. So I'm just going to jump into it and just start explaining recoil, and we'll see how this goes. So what is recoil? Okay. When you're shooting a firearm, the basic, easiest way to explain this is there is a controlled explosion happening within the firearm. This controlled explosion is when the firing pin hits the primer ignites the powder, and the powder burns at an extremely fast rate, which is basically an explosion. Now, because the projectile is inside the chamber of the firearm, the explosion has nowhere to go except to push the bullet out of the gun. Now, every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and energy always needs a place to go. So as the bullet is leaving the barrel, the equal and opposite reaction to the explosion, to the energy that is formed by that burning gunpowder, which is sending the bullet downrange at, let's say, 1,100 feet per second, all that energy has to go somewhere. So as the bullet's going this way, the energy is going that way. And that is recoil. It's the byproduct of the explosion, the controlled explosion, which is sending your bullet away from you, downrange, all right? Now, there's a lot that goes into what that does to the shooter. First off, if we just want to talk about the machinery at hand, all right? The caliber that you're shooting, the firearm that you're holding, how that firearm works, if there's any recoil dampening devices on that firearm, like a muzzle brake or a compensator, or just the difference between a semi-automatic firearm and a non-semi-automatic firearm. There's a lot that goes into how that recoil translates into the shooter. But that's not where it ends either, because the shooter absorbing that recoil, which starts at the hands with a handgun, but goes all the way through your body and ends up in your feet, that has a significant impact on how the recoil is felt. Like I was just saying, Stav is less than half my size. So picture this. When next time you're food shopping, or next time you're at Home Depot, let's say, and you have an empty cart, try pushing and maneuvering that empty cart. And you will see that that cart will move in any particular direction you want it to move in with ease, with a relatively light amount of strength. That's because that cart does not have much mass. It's very light. Now, after you fill up that cart, let's say you double or triple its weight. All right, now that cart is much more difficult to move. It's harder to stop if you're moving. It's harder to go left. It's harder to go right. It's harder to get it moving from a stationary position. So in this kind of example, Stav would be the empty cart and I would be the full cart. If we're shooting the same exact firearm, the amount of energy that it takes to move Stav's hands, moves Stav's whole body, is significantly less than the amount of energy it takes to move my whole body or move my hands, because of the sheer size. Now, when it comes to controlling recoil, the most important aspect of that is probably technique. How you're holding the gun, the way that you're holding it matters a lot. Your strength matters. A stronger person can generally mitigate or control recoil better than a weaker person. But those variables are so dramatically difficult to explain between people, and difficult to even calculate, understand. It's easier to just explain things by using sheer mass. So I'm 230 pounds, Stav's 210 pounds on a very, on a just jumped out of the pool soaking wet day. So the amount of mass that I have behind the gun is significantly more than double than the amount of mass that Stav has behind the gun. So the recoil is going to affect us differently. Now, where this becomes really important is when advice is given, like from instructor to student, or from YouTube patron to YouTube content creator, whatever it might be. You have to understand that when you pick up a gun and you shoot a gun, that is potentially significantly different than when someone else picks up a gun and they shoot a gun. So seeing Stav's hand come flying off that CZ over and over and over again, many people would have seen that video and said, like, oh, you're not holding the gun tight enough, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, you got to do this better. And it's like, whenever I read those comments, or whenever I hear something like that, I go, well, it's very easy to say if you're like a 185-pound man that's been shooting for a while, or at least has proper technique with the gun, and you're holding it, because you have so much more mass and strength absolutely matters. So you have mass, much more mass and strength behind the gun than, let's say, Stav does. So then when she shoots a 380, sometimes people say something like, well, a 380 is not powerful enough, it's not good enough, I would never bet my life on a 380. And it's like, once again, you're coming at this from your own knowledge base and not the knowledge of the people around you that you could potentially study. Which is why I am a fan of 380s, and most recently the 32 H&R mag that Stav was shooting, and the 32 long that she was shooting as well, because you have to approach this as an instructor or even as a shooter on a very individual basis. And Stav says this all the time, and I've always felt this. It's not about what everyone else thinks, it's about what you think, how it feels in your hand, how it shoots in your hand. And it's not necessarily about what everyone says, you know what you should do, this is what you should carry, this is what you should have. Because if we just talked about recoil in a very generic sense, and we just understood that, let's just say I'm twice as heavy, I have twice as much mass as Stav. When I'm shooting a 9mm, all right? So the amount of recoil that's coming into my body if I'm shooting a 9mm is significantly different than when Stav's shooting, like, let's say a 380. They're slightly more comparable. If we're both shooting 9mm, Stav is experiencing much more recoil in every shot than I am. More muzzle rise, more general recoil that flows through her body and ends up going into her feet and then into the ground. Every time she pulls the trigger, if she comes to the range with a 9mm and shoots 50 rounds, and the amount of muzzle flip and recoil she will feel on, like, let's say like a 124 grain bullet, standard velocity bullet, and she's shooting like a full-size 9mm, that amount of recoil is more comparable to me shooting a 357 Magnum or a 10mm with 180 grain bullets. That's, you know, a relatively stout round. When I fire that 10mm, I'll probably experience a similar energy impulse and muzzle rise than when Stav's shooting that 9. When I'm shooting a 9, that's similar to Stav shooting a 380. And that has to do with how recoil works, which I'm going to get into a little bit more with these firearms. But when you're dealing with smaller people, you have to understand they are experiencing significantly more recoil into their body on every single shot. And you, potentially, or whoever might be watching this, if you're a larger person, you're experiencing less recoil in every single shot. So your ability for follow-up shots and your ability to absorb that recoil and your potential ability to be more accurate and not flinch or move that round while you're pulling the trigger is significantly better, simply because of the mass that you bring to the table. So if you can just remember all that, that's important. And all of my shooters that either have trouble with accuracy, I always say start with a very low recoiling weapon. And just understand that when it comes to winning self-defense situations, a hit on your bad guy is always going to be better than a miss. Regardless of how big and heavy that bullet is, if it misses the target, it doesn't do nearly as much to help you win as a much smaller, slower bullet hitting the target. Shot placement, meaning first off hits and then where the hits are, is a significantly more important aspect of terminal ballistics than the power of the actual load, the weight of the bullet and the speed of it. Hits matter more than misses, and better hits matter more than worse hits. So when it comes to choosing a firearm to carry, accuracy and capability of hits should be your primary concern, and then the terminal ballistics on how powerful or how much damage each individual bullet does to its intended target, that should come after. Hits are more important. Then we talk about terminal ballistics. And that's the way it should kind of flow. So when Stav's carrying a 380 and people don't like 380s, well, you know, or it's more important to get a hit. So as you start shooting, or if someone told you that you should be shooting a 9mm, that's it, you should never carry anything less than a 9mm, but you pick up a 380 of some variety and you find that you shoot it better and you shoot it cleaner and it's more comfortable and you feel better about it and you're more confident about it, maybe a lighter powered load is better for you, especially when it comes to small handguns. So keep all this in mind and let's get deeper into recoil, okay? Let's talk a little bit more. I'm gonna pull out a Glock 35 right here. It is empty, it has no magazine in it, and I'm just gonna slide forward. This is a large firearm. And what it does is not only does it have a lot of mass and a lot of size, it allows my entire hand to get onto that firearm. Now when you pull a trigger with this gun, a couple things happen with the recoil conversation. When I pull a trigger and the gun goes bang, that explosion takes place right in here, sends the bullet down. As the bullet leaves the barrel, the slide now starts to come back. So the slide comes back and it gets back to about there. That's as far as it goes, right there. I'm going to lock the slide in place just so you can see it's about there. All right. Now, the reason why that slide just went flying forward is because there's a spring in here. So if I can just show you real quick. Inside the firearm is a spring, and this is called a recoil spring. So we have the recoil spring, all right? This is what sends that slide forward every time the recoil or the human being sends the slide to the rear, all right? So when you pull the trigger on a semi-automatic handgun and the slide comes to the rear, as the slide is coming to the rear and as it's moving, that recoil spring is absorbing a lot of that recoil impulse. All right, it's like a shock absorber in a car. So the amount of recoil, the amount of power that's coming to the rear is being absorbed within that spring. When that slide hits the very end and it can't move anymore, that's when the weapon generally starts to tip up. And the reason why it tips up is because my hand is underneath it. You can see that the barrel goes into the slide and the slide goes over the top of my hand. So when all that energy comes to the rear and that slide abruptly stops because it can't go anymore, the weight of the slide and the velocity of the slide creates another form of energy. And that makes that firearm recoil up a little bit in my hand. And then the slide slams forward on a new round, taking a new round off the magazine, and then me as the shooter put it back on target. But the way that this device absorbs the recoil is helpful. The other thing is I have a full grip. So my entire hand, generally both hands, the recoil comes bleeding down into the grip, into both of my hands, through my wrists, through my forearms, into my shoulders, into my back, down my body, all the way into my feet and into the ground. But because I have that big grip, this entire device, this entire firearm can absorb that recoil, which is why when you fire out of when you shoot a firearm and it's a large firearm on a similar calibered weapon that's smaller, the larger firearm is going to be more comfortable and more shootable, because not only is will the springs and the mass and the weight of the gun absorb recoil, but even that full grip gets to absorb some of that recoil. Now there's another thing happening with plastic guns. The plastic flexes. So this Glock 26 you can see is significantly smaller than the Glock 34. It's lighter than the Glock 34. So when I shoot this firearm, I'm shooting the exact same bullet. I have a lighter firearm with less mass. I have the same type of explosion going forward as going back, so that's a relatively equal, but this gun can't absorb as much recoil as the larger gun because it's smaller and it's lighter. The other thing is that the grip is much smaller. The end of the grip is right here. My pinky is just flying. Even if I put a pinky extension in there, and my pinky kind of has somewhere to go, the end of the grip's still here. So it doesn't have as much surface area and as much capability to absorb all that recoil. So even though we're shooting the exact same bullet, this one is going to recoil more than this one. All right? So as we shrink our guns and as we get them smaller and smaller and smaller, which is really good for concealment and everyday carry, what we do though is we create more and more recoil, which makes guns more and more difficult to shoot accurately, and more difficult to shoot quickly. So there's always that balance. Is this gun too big, too small? We want small firearms that we carry on our body all day long, but we need them to be able to absorb recoil to the point of where we can still be accurate and shoot well. When it comes to a revolver, the same thing occurs. This is Stav's Model 64. She loves this thing. It's big, it's heavy, it's all steel. Now when a revolver shoots, just so we all know, it's empty. Right? When you pull the trigger on a revolver, bang! Number one, you can see there's a different bore axis situation. I mean, look how much higher the bore axis is. If you can just follow that with your eye, it goes like, it's way, way higher than on that Glock, right? So the bore axis is significantly higher. Even if I get right up on it, it's still significantly higher. But there's no springs, there's no movement of a slide to absorb any of that recoil. When you're dealing with a revolver, you just get direct recoil. You pull a trigger, bullet goes out of here, and all of the energy bleeds right through the gun, all the way into the grip, and then your body absorbs all that recoil. The only thing that might matter is if you have a rubber grip. Now, I do not like this grip. I've never liked this grip, but Stav likes this grip, so that's all that matters. But you see how that steel is right there? The whole gun is steel. There's nothing to absorb the recoil there. It's one of the reasons I've always preferred rubber grips that extend over the back of the firearm, over the back of the grip, all right? It's to absorb some of that recoil. So this gun, it's kind of big, it's kind of heavy, and you can shoot 38s, no problem, all day long because of the mass of the gun. The sheer weight of the gun, it's like that full cart at Home Depot or the grocery store. The explosion is you pushing the cart. It's easier to push an empty cart than it is a full cart. This is the full cart. It's harder to move. So that recoil gets absorbed by the mass of the weight and then gets absorbed into the shooter's hand, through the shooter's forearms, all the way down to their feet, and that's how that works. If I take the exact same caliber, this is a 38 special, this is a 38 special. What you can see is it's a significantly smaller gun, smaller in every single way. Smaller grip, smaller barrel, much, much, much lighter. When I pull the trigger on this, I experience a much higher degree of recoil. It has much less. Now it has a rubber grip on the back. If you put normal grips, or the grips that came on this firearm, it is downright unpleasant to shoot. Stav has talked about this in numerous videos. These little small wood grips that come on a J-frame just make it, I mean, it's just extremely unpleasant to fire that weapon. So let me just pull this off so you can kind of see what that grip looks like. All right. You can see that this grip basically looks like this, and you can see there's so much less grip there. Just a tiny, tiny little piece of wood. And you can see all the rubber here, all the rubber there. Putting a larger grip on your firearm to the point of almost discomfort, like that allows a lot more surface area to absorb all that recoil. The fact that this is rubber as well and absorbs it, that's really good too. But even these grips make this gun very comfortable to shoot. I could shoot it, you know, all day. And this is just a wood grip. All wood. It doesn't have that rubber texture, but just because it's so much bigger, if I can just do this again, you can see how much smaller that grip is on all angles, on the front, on the back, the whole thing. This grip, just that bigger size, makes it much more comfortable to shoot. So recoiling on small little revolvers, significantly more than recoil on large revolvers if we're shooting the same caliber. So the reason why recoil is so important, understanding it is so important, is that every time you put your sights on target, you come out, put your sights on target, and you press that trigger, your body knows. Maybe the first few times you shot, you didn't quite know, but right now, as you've been a shooter for a little bit, you've shot guns, your body knows that recoil is about to occur. It understands subconsciously, it understands that there is going to be a controlled explosion within your hands, like 2 feet away from your face, maybe less. And that explosion is going to now move that device that's in your hand, generally towards you and up. So as your brain understands this, what you do as a shooter is you start to push away from the gun. The recoil is going to come this way and this way. So your hands know that it's going to come back and up. So what you do subconsciously is you push out a little bit and down. And that is what causes most people to miss. A right-handed shooter is likely to miss most of their misses. If you start looking at paper, a right-handed shooter is going to shoot low left whenever they experience an improper trigger pull, and that's usually caused by recoil, because we know the recoil is coming, so we push on the gun when we pull the trigger. And a left-handed shooter is going to shoot low right. When you shoot one-handed, you will see this even more dramatically. When you are a one-handed right shooter, right hand, one hand, you're going to miss to the left or low left, and when you switch that gun over and you shoot left, you're going to start shooting right and low right. This is all because of recoil. Your body is adapting to the recoil, and it's trying to control the weapon, and it's pushing the opposite direction. That's what causes most people to miss. Now, I just recently conducted a range where I had people that were, not like super competent shooters. They've been shooters, they've been carrying guns for years, but they weren't like the shooting class. They don't shoot for fun. They shoot when they're told to shoot, right? And we were at 25 yards, and they had trouble hitting the target, even hitting the paper. It's just due to bad recoil management and not fully understanding recoil and how their body adjusts to it. So understanding recoil, understanding that we have to be able to hold the gun and press the round and make the round go off before our body adapts to the recoil, it's a timing situation. It's like timing on a motor. It needs to be correct time. And the best way to become a competent shooter is to shoot things that have very low recoil so that you can really get that timing down. Pellet guns, 22s, low recoiling firearms. Once you can shoot those accurately with ease, then start adding firearms that produce more recoil to the mix. And you'll find that as recoil increases, your accuracy decreases, which is why people love to shoot 22s, whether it be 22 rifles or 22 handguns. The low recoil, the low snap, the low noise makes it more comfortable to shoot, which makes it much more accurate in your average person's hands. So as you're venturing through this concealed carry world and you're starting to think about which gun, and as you're watching Stav's videos and you'll see how recoil affects her, and I always try to get close-ups, two-handed close-ups and one-handed close-ups of recoil so you can see how the recoil is affecting her from gun to gun to gun. Just understand that the more and more recoil you experience, the more likely you are to be less accurate with that firearm. So I encourage people to shoot as often as they can, but it might still be very valuable to shoot lower recoiling firearms even if they're more expensive. So even though I know shooting a 380 is more expensive than shooting a 9mm, and shooting a 32 is more expensive than shooting a 38, it still might be a better choice for a lot of people out there because the lower recoil will get you shooting more accurately, and the more often you do that, the more you are rehearsing proper shooting technique, and the more likely you're going to be able to hit as you increase recoil. People are so much in a rush to get right to, get right to it. I want to get right into, I want to buy a 9mm, it's like, well, let's start you with a pellet gun. Let's move into the 22s, let's get you on a 380, and then let's see if you can graduate to a 9mm or something like that. And everybody out there that's carrying a 9mm that doesn't like 380, well, why aren't you carrying a 10mm? I'll tell you why. Because you prefer the recoil impulse on a 9mm, you prefer the cost of a 9mm, you probably prefer having extra rounds, and you probably prefer having a lighter, more manageable gun to carry. And I agree with every part of that. But when someone carries a smaller gun than a 9mm, it's for the exact same reasons. They want a light firearm. They want the recoil to be more controllable. All of those things, they're always the same. The way you feel about what shoots good in your hands is very similar to how someone else might feel about it. It's just that they're perceiving the recoil differently than you. And you should understand that so that you can give, all my firearm instructors can give better advice, and all my shooters can become more accurate and better with their firearms in a shorter period of time. So as we continue through this concealed carry series, and as we watch Stav shoot more and more guns, just understand that recoil is a dramatically important thing to understand and to psychologically and physically understand so that you can become a more competent shooter. And Stav is an excellent shooter. One thing I've always wanted to say, but I haven't said it, is the targets we use are qualification targets for Massachusetts police officers. A hit is the entire target, not the entire piece of paper, the entire bottle. We don't do that. I make Stav keep him in the circle because, that is a huge target. She'd have hundreds in every single gun. You have to make it harder so you can see the difference between gun to gun. But the accuracy that she's able to generate with even all these small guns is very, very good. So shoot as many guns as you can. Experience as much recoil, as much recoil as you can from different firearms. Understand that revolvers may recoil a little bit more than semi-automatics for similar size firearms. That doesn't mean you shouldn't choose one. You should choose whatever feels comfortable. But also understand that the grip on a revolver is very easy to change out, and a bad grip can make a gun very difficult to shoot, and you can take that exact same gun and put a decent grip on it, and you'll be amazed at how well you can shoot. So real important to understand. New grips on revolvers can change the whole situation. Semi-automatics absorb more recoil to begin with, but smaller equals more recoil. Shoot a bunch of guns, shoot a bunch of different things, see what the recoil does to you, see how accurate you can be. Carry those guns and continue to always be learning. Always, always, always be learning. I've been a firearms instructor for my entire adult life and I'm still learning. I'm still always learning. If you think you know everything, you don't. All right, so continue to learn. Always be humble and continue to learn. And there's always a new trick coming out. So there you go. I hope you liked this video. I hope you got something out of it. I hope you understand recoil a little bit more. And I'll come at you with more information whenever Stav asks me to. Guys, I just wanted to show you one more thing. I have two virtually identical firearms in my hand. They're both of the Colt variety, Detective Special Cobra. Cobra's in one hand, Detective Special in the other hand. Now, what I want to show you is they're basically the same minus the grip, all right? If you look at these two grips, there's a couple things going on. This grip has the steel going right down the back. This grip has rubber going down the back. This gun is, even though it's lighter, it's significantly more comfortable to shoot than this gun. Not only does the steel run down the back so I get that direct recoil into my hand, but you see the distance under the trigger right here, right there. When my knuckle goes under there, see if I can do something. I guess this is the best way to do it. My knuckle slides under there and I hold the firearm. You can see that the steel is resting on my knuckle. So when I pull the trigger, this part of the steel smashes into the front of my knuckle. So you can see that on a lot of grips, they will fill that void. You see how this right here, this rubber part right here, it doesn't go behind the trigger as much. So you can see behind the trigger how much room there is behind that trigger, right in this area. My knuckle doesn't really go behind the trigger guard. It's underneath it. So when I pull the trigger, this knuckle doesn't get smashed by the metal on the trigger guard. Every time I shoot this gun, my knuckle is behind the trigger. It gets smashed and it hurts there. So virtually identical guns. This one in theory should recoil less because it's all steel and it's heavier, but this one's much, much better off. Much, much better, just because of the grip, and that's super important. So just know that for like $25, if you're uncomfortable with your firearm, you can fix it. You can fix it. You can fix revolvers super easy. This gun, I'll shoot all day long and don't have a problem with my hand. This gun, it's too pretty to shoot anyways, but I'll shoot it and I'll go, I gotta put another grip on there if I wanna shoot it a lot. But same gun, change the grip, and you'll be super happy with it. So for all my revolver people out there that might be having trouble with their revolver, their comfort, try a different grip. You'll be amazed at what it does. Semi-automatic people, you might not have all those options. Some firearms have different grips and different grip adjustments you can make on semi-autos, but for the most part, you're kind of stuck with what you got. So figure out what works best for you, try to make some adjustments, and keep on trucking. But the way that gun interfaces with your hand can have a significant impact on how it feels, especially during recoil.
Okay guys, that's gonna do it for this video. I was downstairs doing some other work while Mac was up here filming. So
just rambling on.
No idea what he said, but I'm sure it was all brilliant because he knows a lot about this stuff. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please make sure to check out the description below. We have links to our online courses, which are currently on sale, 40% off for spring. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video and we'll see you in the next one. Stay safe. Bye.
And the gun she's carrying now it's kind of my pick for what I think is going to win. So we'll see if it all ties together. So watch for the new gun coming out.
Stay tuned. Okay, stay safe. Bye.